We have a lot to cover in today's video, including discussing the possibility of a huge three-way deal that could possibly go down between the Blackhawks, the Blue Jackets, and the Oilers that would involve Seth Jones. It would be a lot of moving pieces there. We also have the latest on the Predators. Could Filip Forsberg be the next guy out of town? We also have the latest free agent rumblings, and we're going to go over a list of key dates as we get ready for an extremely busy July in the NHL offseason. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. We're going to go through a variety of things. So again, this is going to be a longer video where you're going to want to pay close attention and listen all the way through, because there's a lot of key information that you may miss out on otherwise. So we're going to get started here today by going through some of the latest rumblings we're hearing on some potential RFA and UFA deals that might be close to getting done here ahead of free agency. Now, there's also word that the Oilers are getting closer to signing defenseman Adam Larsson. We had heard that they'd made good progress and talks were going well quite some time ago, actually, but then things kind of got quiet for a while, but now there's more reports that things are kind of ramping up again and that they're trying to get him signed before free agency gets underway. They still obviously have a few weeks, but as we're going to talk about here in some upcoming segments in this video, the Oilers are a team that are inquiring to do some other things, including some trades, buyouts, etc. Going to be a busy team, so the more they can get done sooner than later will help them kind of project out where things are at for the overall roster. So I would not be surprised to see a Larsson contract get done sooner than later. And another defenseman as well who's a pending RFA is Nikita Zadorov in Chicago. Apparently they are leaning towards getting him signed, and progress has been made on an extension in that regard as well. I know he's a defenseman that, to me, it makes a lot of sense for them to keep him. They gave up Brandon Saad to acquire him last offseason. Obviously they're in a situation when it comes to the expansion draft, like many teams, they kind of have to decide who's going to get signed, who's not, who's going to be protected, unprotected, etc. And right now it's looking like there's a good chance he gets signed. And if he is signed, I would think there'd be a really good chance that he would be protected as well. But again, Chicago is another team with a lot of moving parts right now, and a team that we're going to be discussing at greater length here shortly in a few minutes in this video. Now, moving on to the next segment here, I want to take a look as well at a calendar of important dates coming up. This is going to be one of the busiest months in the NHL offseason that you've seen in a long time. As I mentioned before, a combination of things. The fact that our offseason this year is certainly shorter and more condensed because the NHL season is going longer. They're not pushing out the NHL season starting up in the fall, or maybe starting about maybe a week later than usual. That's about it. So there's a lot to cover in a short period of time, and there's a lot of key important dates. And I know I've seen lots of comments on the channel on various videos lately saying, when does this happen? When does that happen? Etc. etc. And I thought, it's a good time now that we're into July. We're getting closer to a lot of these things being, officially taking place. That we'll go through here a list of dates to look for as you get ready for all the craziness of this NHL offseason. As you can see, there's a graphic on the screen courtesy of capfriendly.com, a terrific resource. I know most people are familiar with it. If you're not, you're certainly missing out. Lots of great info, and they produced this that they put out on their social media that I thought was a nice kind of summary here of everything we kind of need to know. So here we go. So the buyout window, first buyout window of the NHL offseason gets underway 24 hours after the Stanley Cup is awarded. So when the playoffs are done, 24 hours later, the first buyout period opens. The other date you see there is July 13th. That was like the latest possible date, whatever came first. Now, the way the schedule has gone, the NHL is going to end up finishing the Stanley Cup final a little bit sooner than that. I know at one point it was believed that the latest possible date was like the 15th or something. And when this was put out, obviously the final schedule wasn't completely finalized yet. But at this point, it looks as though, to me, probably like July 11th would be the latest. And that would be if the NHL finals here go 7 games. Right now, the Tampa Bay Lightning lead Montreal 2-0, and Game 3 goes this evening. So we'll have to see. But we're still early on, so that's the first thing in the offseason that's not far away. Also, on the 13th is the deadline for teams to ask any players that have a no-move clause to waive it for the expansion draft. So some teams are already ahead of that, but that's the absolute latest that they can formally request a player to waive. And then on the 16th of July is the last day that you can put a player through waivers before the expansion draft, and it's also the deadline for players to agree to waive their no-move clause for expansion. So, like I said, we already know of a handful of players that are we believe already have or are expected to waive, but that's the deadlines to find out what we can do in that regard to what players will be available. As of the 17th, we have a trade and a waiver freeze. So any activity that we're going to see ahead of the expansion draft will be done prior to that date, because all rosters essentially will be frozen for a few days. So a look out for a lot of activity, likely the week leading into that would be my best guesstimate here. Of course, also happening on the 17th is the first day that teams can elect for salary arbitration with their RFAs. Now, of course, there is another period later on where players can elect as well. Date as of the 18th. That is the deadline for the NHL to approve and distribute the list of protected players for the expansion draft. So all teams get to see what teams are protecting and leaving unprotected for expansion, of course, including the Seattle Kraken. And of course, on that date as well is the beginning of the interview period where the Kraken can talk to any UFAs or RFAs that were left unprotected by their last teams that they were with, and they can work out deals. So essentially, Seattle can take a look and say, okay, this RFA is unprotected, that UFA is unprotected, and they have a chance to negotiate a contract. Of course, they're not going to select them with that team's pick, obviously, unless they're going to get the player. So they have time to speak to them and work that out ahead of time. And then on the 21st is when Seattle has to submit their selections for expansion to the league. And at the same time as well, they'd have to select and submit any contract for any UFAs or RFAs that they actually worked out a deal and were successfully able to sign. Then, of course, lastly, on the 21st, we will have all the Seattle selections revealed on the actual expansion draft. So then the next day, on the 22nd, the trade/waiver freeze is lifted. Activity can resume as normal. Then on the 23rd is the NHL draft for round 1. That's going to be a little bit later in the day in the evening, which will be televised. And then the next day, the 24th, they do rounds 2 through 7. Now, I would suspect, like I said, we're going to get a lot of trade activity probably about the week leading into expansion. And then again at the NHL draft, there'll be additional trades. There always are, and I expect this year to be busier than usual. And then that takes us to the 26th, which is the deadline for RFAs to receive their qualifying offer. Of course, when players are restricted free agents, teams have to give them their qualifying offers to retain their rights. And then, of course, they can continue to negotiate after that. July 27th is when actually player contracts officially expire. Normally that's June 30th, and free agencies the next day, July 1, but things are different this year because of the season being extended. All contracts were set to expire on July the 27th. Then, of course, also on the 27th is the RFA contract player period where players with qualifying offers can be offer sheeted. So, of course, that's how things go. Because if you don't get a qualifying offer, you become a UFA. An offer sheet would not apply in those situations. But any RFAs that have at least received their qualifying offer can receive an offer sheet as of July the 27th. And, of course, on the 28th is the day that we get an NHL free agency. So that'll kind of be our free agent frenzy day, where the typically, at least, the bulk of the signings are likely taking place. But I would imagine this year with the tight cap, it could, maybe drag out a little longer before you get the bulk of the players, at least the bigger names, all looked after. And of course, it's also the beginning of the period where those RFAs that receive their qualifying offers can choose to accept them. There's not generally a ton of RFAs that end up accepting their qualifying offers. They end up usually negotiating something afterwards. It just kind of depends. But you do get some that do, but a lot that don't. So that is your list of key dates heading into an extremely busy NHL offseason, which we're not really all that far away from. If you think about today being July the 2nd, the buyout window will kind of kick things off here, which could be, it really just depends on when the cup is awarded. If the finals only go 4 or 5 games, we're looking at within a week here where we're really going to really kick off what we call like the silly season. So buckle up. There's lots of activity coming, and we'll keep you up to date with everything here on the channel. So certainly stay tuned for even more content than usual, more likely throughout the month of July. Now, before we get into today's trade rumors, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken a level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thank you very much for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Also want to thank the sponsor for all their support over the past few months as well. Also very much appreciated. Getting into today's Trade Talk, I do want to get into the Nashville Predators quickly before we talk about the potential Seth Jones three-way deal or how all that could work involving Jones and Duncan Keith. Of course, with the Nashville Predators, they recently traded Viktor Arvidsson. Now, we know that the Predators are more than likely going to be making other deals and kind of beginning the process to go through a bit of a retool. I'm not sure we can call it a rebuild per se. They have so many anchor contracts like Duchesne, Johansson. Yossi's a stronger player than those guys, but obviously another big long-term deal in the books. I don't know if we can really call it a rebuild, but either way, they're making some changes and certainly looking to kind of retool there in Nashville. So Viktor Arvidsson goes to LA for a couple of draft picks, which in my opinion was a pretty underwhelming return. I understand his scoring was down a little bit the last couple of years, but really if you look at how all the advanced metrics and how much he drives play and all that, like he's really an important piece, and I think that LA got a pretty good steal there in my opinion. Now, could Filip Forsberg be the next one out? It's certainly debatable. I know there was some who thought he was available at the NHL trade deadline, but based on a lot of the sources I follow, they indicate that that wasn't really the case. Now, if Poile would have received an offer that completely knocked his socks off, something he couldn't refuse, I'm sure he would have done it. We know he's not afraid to make big trades and do significant things. He's done it numerous times throughout his long career as a general manager in Nashville. Of course, he's still the only GM ever for that franchise, and they've been in the league a really long time. Now, of course, Forsberg, though, even though he wasn't technically available then, appears to be available now. And I know he made his feelings known on social media, which certainly kind of spawned a new kind of reaction, wondering if he might be one of the next guys to go. When the Viktor Arvidsson trade was announced, he did react to it through his social media, posting a big thumbs down emoji there. So certainly not afraid to let his feelings know that he was not happy about the Viktor Arvidsson trade. Forsberg would be a guy that would draw even more interest than Arvidsson, and I know there's some teams out there that would probably love to have a guy like that on their top six on the wing. So I can't say for certain that he's going to get moved, but I think it's fair to say that his feelings are known. There was already rumors about him being possibly available this summer anyways, and I think at this point he might welcome it more than before. So we'll see if Forsberg ends up being one of the next guys moved out of town. Now, the big topic for today is the potential three-way deal between the Oilers, the Hawks, and the Blue Jackets. Now, it may not go down as a three-way trade. There could be even another team involved. There's a lot of moving parts here, but they kind of summarize what's expected. This all kind of got started here with the latest announcement from Elliot Friedman in the past day or so that Duncan Keith from Chicago was likely getting traded, and he indicated that it was either the Pacific Northwest, which would indicate Seattle, or Western Canada, which was the two most likely destinations. Now, Western Canada could be more than one team. So a lot of people assume likely the Oilers, the Flames, or the Canucks. Clearly, the Jets are kind of in Western Canada, but they're a little bit more central, and they didn't really appear to be the team that was being hinted towards here. So with all that said, obviously the Kraken are a brand new team. I mentioned in my video the other day that he could possibly end up going to Seattle, and I could see Chicago maybe working out a deal if he waives his no-move clause, that he becomes available in expansion, and maybe they agree to take him. Now, one good thing about Duncan Keith's contract, he's got a $5.5 million cap hit, but he's making significantly less money. He's only making 2.1 next year and 1.5 the year after. So for teams that are, obviously, which applies to a lot of teams, cash strapped or, want to spend as much cash as they can limit that, well, that's a good contract to have. But the problem for some of them is the actual AAV, the cap hit. But a lot of that was front loaded and already paid out. So the actual money he's getting paid is not so much an issue, but it's the hit. So clearly it's a case where he's rumored to believe now to be like the leading contender to be the Edmonton Oilers. Now, obviously, like I said, a lot of the Canuck reporters, which we talked about yesterday, appeared like, they did their digging and said, like, I don't think Vancouver is it. But now, based on Edmonton media, what Elliot Friedman has said more on some radio hits, it looks as though that the Oilers are the leading contenders to land Duncan Keith. It's believed that some of the top players in the team were looking for management to bring in a little bit more veteran help, and that he could certainly play a role like that. He wants to get closer to his son, who lives in BC, and his ex-wife lives there as well. Like I mentioned before, he's a BC boy. He's grew up mostly in BC after moving there from Ontario early in his teen years. Played junior hockey there through the BCHL, through the WHL, etc. So like, it's kind of what home is for him. His parents are there as well. So I can understand at age 37, those kind of things are starting to become more important, and he's kind of ready to wind things down closer to home. And of course, Edmonton's not too far from there, so it kind of makes sense. And the other thing that Keith is apparently looking for is he would obviously, if he can, play on a team that's closer to contending. And not to say that the Oilers are, I'm not sure we can call them a cup contender today, but they did finish with a good regular season last year, even though they got skunked in the playoffs. So ultimately, the Oilers seem to be the leading contender for Duncan Keith. Now, how does Duncan Keith relate to Seth Jones? Well, here's the connection, is that the Hawks appear to be one of the front runners for Seth Jones, so really want to acquire him, and moving Duncan Keith's contract would obviously be a major help. Now, like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a three-way deal. This could be a set of two trades among three different teams. So we could see possibly a trade with Duncan Keith going to Edmonton, but you would think at that point that Chicago needs to take a contract back from Edmonton to offset the money. So we're talking about either Koskinen or James Neal. But if they could avoid buying out Koskinen, have him trade it instead, or a combination of Koskinen or Neal or Turris or something, would have to go the other way to Chicago. If they will take a contract back, then that will certainly help. Now, Chicago doesn't have a ton of cap space themselves, but they do have Seabrook and Shaw, who can go on LTIR, not playing anymore. So they have that for this year as well. Of course, it was also reported from Elliot Friedman, he wonders if Chicago, as part of a Duncan Keith trade to Edmonton, might be looking to bring back Caleb Jones. They might want to bring in both of the Jones brothers. So it certainly makes things a little bit more interesting in that regard. Now, it's believed that the Columbus Blue Jackets are pretty well, I think we can fair to say, the three main teams, three or four, that really appear to be in the most on Jones are the Hawks, the Flyers, the Avalanche, and to a degree the LA Kings. Now, I think LA's probably on the outside there. I'm not sure they're as serious about things, but the Avs, the Flyers, and the Hawks are definitely the most serious about making this deal. And now, out of the three, it's believed that the Avalanche are the one team who would not want to do an extension. They would be more interested in getting him just for the year and seeing how it goes from there, because they are going to have some major cap issues. They've got to sign Cale Makar, Gabriel Landeskog, and Philip Grubauer. They have a fair bit of space, but still, they're going to be pretty tapped out. And then I get the Nathan McKinnon contract coming up in the not too distant future. Like, they really can't take on another long-term deal right this minute. It's going to be tough for them to do. So they prefer to kind of get him, go all in for a season, and then see where it goes. That would be the Avalanche approach. But obviously, the asking price going back to the Jackets is going to be significantly higher if they get a contract extension. So the Jackets, I'm sure, would rather deal with either the Hawks or the Flyers if they want that to be part of it, and it seems like they would be more interested in that. So that's a big part of the equation. So it boils down to, will he do an extension with either of those teams? That's certainly debatable. Now, we recently got an article too from Jackets writer Aaron Portzline from The Athletic, talking about some different trade potential for Seth Jones and what could be coming back. So they looked at some mock trades and discussed what the likely return could be. Now, from Chicago, it looked at a combination of a couple of younger players like a Philip Kurashev and a Nikolai Baudin, maybe a first-round pick in there. Like, there could be a combination of assets in that regard. When it came to the Philadelphia Flyers, it had some different assets in there, like Phil Myers on the blue line, Morgan Frost, the prospect Zane Wisdom, and a first-round pick. So again, somewhat comparable packages there. The Hawks probably have a little bit more options, I think, than the Flyers do. The Flyers could also opt to include something different too. They have some other players. I wouldn't be completely shocked if they were willing to include Travis Konechny in a deal. His name has been floated out there as well, and it wouldn't be completely shocking if the Jackets push for Sanheim over Myers. I don't know if the Flyers do that, but I can see how they might find him more interesting. But I know a lot of teams are very interested in Phil Myers with that size and everything. Like it's an intriguing guy to possibly have on your blue line. So at the end of the day, we're getting close here on a Jones deal. Those are the teams that are most likely the most interested in making it happen. And then you bring in Keith and the Oilers. And said basically the Oilers take Keith, which frees up the space to take Jones. And then, of course, if the Hawks are also pushing to get Caleb Jones from Edmonton, it could possibly evolve into a three-way trade, or it could be a couple of separate trades. It's really hard to say. But the other thing, like I mentioned, there could even be another team involved because the Edmonton Oilers, if they're going to take Keith, they need to get money off their books too. And if the Hawks can't or won't take a contract back, they may need another team to kind of broker the deal and get some kind of extra incentive for basically weaponizing their cap space. But the Edmonton Oilers would have to have James Neal preferably come off the books because he's got 2 years left at $5.75. So that to me would level out. And then, of course, like I said, you have Koskinen and Turris that are buyout candidates. If they could get them off the books too, that would be even better. But if they don't, they can consider buyouts to free up some space that way. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of balls in the air here. I'm not sure how close we are to getting something done, but I would think that it's quite likely that something like this would prefer to be done before the expansion draft so that they can kind of organize where their protected lists are. But at the same time, it could even end up completing at the NHL draft if it doesn't get done by then, because there certainly could be some first round picks involved and others. And obviously, like I said, a lot of this would be dependent on Seth Jones and if he will do an extension with any of these teams. And it's going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out here. And we could have some different looking blue lines in all of their teams if this all comes to be. So let me know your thoughts. Do you see Seth Jones being a good member of the Blackhawks? Duncan Keith going to Edmonton? What do you see needing to happen on the Edmonton side to make that happen as well? So let me know all your thoughts in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.